This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you like underground music, movies, and more, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed merch, vinyl, CDs, and more. Plug in the discount code 10OFF, TENOFF, for a 10% discount at portlanddistro.com. After you're done with this, be sure to check out the other Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse. Brandon Legion's Horrorwolf 666, Jackie Smith's Into the Necrosphere, Everything Went Black, which you are listening to right now, Necromaniacs, which is hosted by myself, Jeff Kashid, and Mike Scandato. And on Sunday, the Lord's Day, check out Soul Knox Podcast. They were mad, Jeff realized. Or he was. He had been overworking. This was a dream, a paranoid fantasy. This knowledge made him calmer. He would follow his mad logic, at least until he could be certain with whom the insanity lay. But some diseases are eradicated, he protested. When they become expendable, Dr. Thackeray told him, some, of course, simply die out or fall victim to the non-medical intervention. Others we announce a cure for. Makes the profession look good. The world was restored to faith in medicine, praises its practitioners, and pours more money into research. The prestige a physician enjoys in the community is an essential factor to us. And that was a short excerpt from today's installment of Darkness Weaves. This is our fourth installment in our analysis of the work of Karl Edward Wagner. The first order of business is going through the recently republished In a Lonely Place by the great Valancourt Books. And for today, we're doing the fourth seal, as I mentioned. So how's it going, Karl? Everything going good?
Yeah, not too bad. It's another day, and it's rainy. It's been like just constant rain the last 2 days, which is kind of unusual weather for a Colorado. So
Yeah, it was kind of chilly and overcast yesterday and today too out here. And yeah, we were talking a little bit before. I just returned from the Nightlands Festival this weekend, which was the Cadabra Records inaugural event. This is the first one they did, and it was a lot of fun. There was a pre-show on Thursday, which featured John Padgett and Chris Bozzone performing the Pictures of Apocalypse record in its entirety. I don't want to say audiobook because it's not at all what it is. It's like it's its own thing. It's like a spoken word narration with musical accompaniment, and that's what Cadabra Records does. And they also did some selections from Noctuary, which is a forthcoming release. They're going to be doing a repress of the book and the record. And
they're doing a record too.
Yeah, the records are beautiful. Paul Romano is doing the artwork for the Noctuary book and record. And I actually was able to secure a print of the artwork. Really cool.
Sick.
And yeah, it's beautiful. It's great. Romano's incredible artist. And yeah, the rest of the Friday and Saturday was just spent down in this incredible structure called Cathedral down in South Jersey in a small town called Hamilton. And ST Joshi was there, which was like a huge thing for me. And, you and I are both fans of him. And any of the better presentations of Lovecraft's work, you'll see that Joshi has something to do with the annotations or just something to do with those things. And, he was just a scholar, so it was really cool to hear him talk and meet him. And anyone who follows me on Instagram will see that I took a picture with him, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw that. I was like, oh, that's sick that you got to meet SG Joshi. And then I was starting to think about how like there's only a select people probably in your your friend group who are like, oh, that's awesome. You know what I mean? Like there's probably a lot of people who are like, I don't know. I don't know who that is, you know?
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, there's like a short list of people who know who he is, but it's like those are the important people, those ones who I have a lot in common with, and
Yeah.
so it's cool, But yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And now to loop back into today's episode, I was asking people because some of the people at Cadabra, I mean, I had Chris on as a guest a few months ago,
Yeah.
so they're familiar with the show and they listen to the podcast occasionally, and I brought up Karl Edward Wagner to these people, and no one is even familiar with him, believe it or
Oh,
not.
wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy. How's that possible?
Yeah, it's just he's such a mystery man, It's so I did my best to try to educate people on his great work. And yeah, I don't know. It's like a mystery to me why more people don't read him. I mean, a lot of it, yeah, sure, everything's been out of print for a really long time, but I'm hoping that people will start paying attention more. I mean, Valancourt put out that collection when, and we're trying to do what we can do.
Also, um, I was apprised by Nas, from Alclise that there's a audiobook version of An Only Place on Audible. So I picked that up as well. So, and then because I was like, well, that's really useful because not only can I read the story, but then when I'm preparing for the episode, I can listen to it as well, which is what I did today. I listened to this story like, just a little bit ago before we started, so it's like fresh in your mind while I'm working. I can listen to it, and you know what I mean. And the guy who does the reading is really good. Like
Cool.
Yeah, he does like kind of different voices for all the characters and stuff, and yeah, it's so people, you can get the book, you can get the audio book, like
So anyone out there is listening to this and you don't like to read, get the
yeah,
audio book and listen to it, at your own leisure, and you can enjoy his work as well.
yeah, exactly. So definitely recommend. Yeah, like I said, I picked it up because I can listen to stories while I work as well. So because I like to read the story, but it's kind of nice to be able to do both.
I mean, reading it, I feel like you really like when you read something, it's like your brain does something with the symbols and the letters, like these like weird symbols. Your brain has to arrange them into ideas, and that activity of taking something that your eyes could see on a page and understanding them as ideas, I think is a really crucial thing for our development as people. I think it's like something that's like magical in some ways, and your brain conjures up these images. And I just find that to be so enriching to my life, to do that regularly. And it's it just expands your whole intellect, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, like there's a difference. Like I do, I like to listen to audiobook while I work or whatever, but I feel like there's like an extra dimension when you actually sit and read something for real. You know what I mean? Like I like particularly doing a show like this, like I need to be able to I couldn't just do it based off of listening to it. I need to read it as well because it's like somehow that makes everything sink in more. You know what I mean? Like
So the Fourth Seal, it's one of Wagner's earlier pieces. It was first published in Whispers, 1975, and Whispers is a periodical that came out. Styx was also published in that periodical, and Lee Brown Coy's art also was on the cover a lot of times of Whispers. So
oh yeah.
yeah.
The there's like a little thing that Wagner writes in the back of this book. It has this thing. It says, "The Fourth Seal was written in October 1971, during the period after which I had dropped out of medical school and out of a PhD program in neurobiology. The story pretty well reflects my bitterness toward the medical profession, and the briefly mentioned character Walker is a thin disguise of the author's persona. The story was inspired by a series of lectures in epidemiology concerning the cyclical nature of deadly diseases. This much of Fourth Seal is factual, as are many of the conversations and political sentiments expressed by the characters. This later exemplified the repressive attitudes in medical education during the late 1960s, from which I had turned and discussed the goal of making a career in writing. So yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking how this story is very personal to him because you know we know, and hopefully you guys know since we've been talking about it on all these episodes, that he you know, he was in the medical, he was in on his way to becoming a physician. So this is like personal to him. And this story reflects like his it's probably one of his most cynical stories, really, if you think about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, this story, like, I'll have to, I mean, as we'll obviously get into it more as we go on, but this one hits a nerve for me of like my own like cynicism towards doctors and American Medical Association and stuff, like, because if you just look at the history of the AMA, it's done some pretty horrendous stuff, like almost openly, like flagrantly, as in terms of like discrediting any other form of medicine aside from its own, like pushing like fucked up stuff. It's a pretty it's it's not, this story isn't too close from reality, really, so
You know, in some conspiratorial circles, I'm sure people are actually thinking this is what's going on, you know. And for all I know, that for all we both know, this could be the reality. You know, there's like some secret society, you know, with these like silver and onyx rings, like, you know, running everything and, you know, restraining certain cures and all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I guess we can get into the story and then yeah, talk about it
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. So the main character is Metzger, Jeff Metzger. He's a young doctor, sort of like a wonderkind. You know, he's like a very talented guy. He comes from his father was a physician. You know, they have means. We learn about him that, you know, he's done excellently in school. He has had the best residencies. He's even done some kind of you know, charity work as far as like, you know, lending out his expertise to people who are less privileged and helping them. So he's an all around positive force in the medical field, very idealistic, looking to better mankind, you know. So that's what we know about Metzger. And he's also married too. He's got a wife.
Yeah. He takes the ideals of the Hippocratic Oath like very seriously. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
It's a very solemn oath for him.
yeah.
So we come into him and Thackeray. He's like the chairman of the department, discussing some of the roots of medicine, you know, or some beliefs, a belief set of where medicine came from, that there was like a old, like an ancient technology that was a combination of like medical ideas, physics, you know, astronomy, magic, you know, it was all sort of blended together, you know, and that was like this ancient belief system, you know. A friend of Metzger's was a big champion of that.
yeah, the aforementioned Kirk Walker that he taught. Yeah, which is
Yeah,
supposed to be his persona. Yeah, this beginning already sets up something that's true for the whole story, is that the majority of the action in this story is through dialogue and conversations. So I mean, almost everything is done in conversation in the story, you know?
yeah, it's very dialogue heavy, and you know, it's funny, like anyone who has listened to Necromaniacs will hear me go on and on about how I love movies with a lot of dialogue. And I kind of feel like this would make a good film in that vein, you know, like
Hmm.
maybe a short or something that might have been included in you know, like Cabinet of Curiosities or something like that, you know.
Yeah, I could see this as almost being like like a night gallery episode or something, where it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, it's done in dialogue and I think it would be pretty cool. I mean, you could probably do this in a really cool way, and the way that the story has these cuts and stuff like that, it reads kind of like when reading it, I can imagine it being a show or a movie or something, because you can kind of even see like the scene breaks and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
So Metzger's friend, the guy that's the stand-in for Wagner. He gets in a disagreement with over grades. Apparently, like back in these times, it was less like grading had a lot more to do with like a subjectivity to your work, so you can argue points with your professors and whatever. And so this guy leaves medical school and then mysteriously dies of a Hodgkin's disease.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because he's talking about Kirk would say, and the other part about this is that apparently Thackeray, the head of the whole like medical this like whatever it is like school or not school, but it's like
Called the
um
center.
the center, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean this Walker guy would talk about Egyptian artifacts, Greek thinkers, Byzantine and later Roman writings, Islamic studies after the Roman lake changed owners, Jewish Kabbalism, secret researches by certain monks on through the Dark Ages and into the Renaissance, even throughout bits of Chinese history. And you talk about like Bacon and Paracelsus and Albertus Magnus, like all the his alchemists and stuff like that. So he's basically saying that, and they're talking about how the difference between science and magic and how everything was different at that time. So it's like, like basically part of what he's like seems to be arguing for is that there's an existence of some type of like the idea that we had like access to things before we think we do, like the people that some type of cabal of some sort has had access to higher levels of science and medicine than what we are aware of, basically. Yeah.
What's interesting is the connection of the title of Fourth Seal is from the book of Revelations. That's the pale horseman of the apocalypse kind of thing, which is like very much prominent in the book of Revelations. And that whole idea of there being a repressive organization sort of dispelling these ancient beliefs is like in line with like a lot of like the Catholics, basically, and the persecution of some of the early astronomers and that sort of thing. So it's pretty on the money with that sort of ideology, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And like, and I think it's funny because there's like just a lot of stuff about like the idea of progress. In fact, the conception of science as we understand it is a relatively modern development of thought. Like there's a lot of conversation about this type of stuff in this section, and it's like I think yeah, it says like, is it any wonder then that Walker's proto-scientists kept their work secret, shared their discoveries only with a select brotherhood? At least that was Kirk's theory. And and Thackeray like doesn't seem to he's down with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like subtly like letting on.
Yeah, there's kind of like a bit of foreshadowing in this too, and also this isn't one of the longer stories in this collection either, so it kind of moves along pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah.
There's another piece of foreshadowing too, where Metzger's commenting on the coffee that's available in the labs, in this facility, where each medical facility has like a worsening quality of coffee available, and he comments on the acrid flavor of the coffee. So right away, that this is, the first time I read this story, I only had read the story for the first time when I got this collection because it wasn't in any of the other things I had. And I was like, oh, the coffee's going to play into this somehow. They're making a point out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I like later on when, he gets his own laboratory and everything. And he gets like a coffee maker just for his own lab. And he says that no, even with your own coffee maker, it still tastes like bad. It's so funny.
He's a man after my own heart, man. Like if I was some kind of scientist or doctor and I had a lab, I'd definitely have my own coffee maker in there.
Yeah, you definitely have to. You're not going to share a copy of everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Metzger is, we given his whole background of, he was at St. John's, like a kind of liberal arts school. As he started doing that instead of going directly to medical school. Then he goes to Harvard. So he's combined like a liberal arts education. He has his combined MD, PhD in biochemistry, a stint with the public health service in the poverty belt. And mentions his family connections, like an uncle with a governorship, a brother doing very well in the vice presidential ladder of a very big corporation, and a good marriage socially. And
They say socially because we learned that this marriage is actually typical of the way that Wagner portrays the man-woman relationship. These types of relationships seem to be like the norm in all Wagner stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if people get married like for a social, yeah. I guess Jeff's father had been his father, very influential in the AMA, had been supposedly slated for its top post at the time of his death from a coronary. So comes from a medical family, I think you said earlier. And yeah, he moves and moves into his thing. And then the next section, we're kind of talking about that kind of like cutting. It cuts from him like crumpling up the cup and throwing it away to all of a sudden like it's a conversation between him and his wife. And his wife asks him if he noticed this ring that Sid Lipton had on last night.
I thought this was an interesting way of telling this part of the story because it's like they're referring back to something that happened last night instead of it being in real time. Like there's it's breakfast time, you know what I mean? And they're having breakfast and it's at the morning after the party. And they noticed that Dr. Lipton had this like really sick ring, this black onyx ring with like a, some sort of like a sigil on it, like a silver and onyx ring. And he was just kind of flashing that around. And Thackeray he kind of scolds him for wearing it out in public. Like she observed that happening, right? So I thought that was an interesting way of telling the story rather than having it happen in real time where they're actually at the party and, Metzger would have observed that or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it well, it's funny too because she's the one noticing. She tells him about it. He just like brushing it off, like not even paying any attention or really. Like he's trying to watch the show, the news, and there's like he's like upset because of this. I think like the liberal presidential campaign the head liberal like presidential like candidate has just died suddenly. Like he's like upset about that because he's definitely a kind of a liberal like type of guy, and she's like trying to talk to him about the stuff, and she brings up the ring, how Thackeray told him not to, tell him not to wear it. He's not paying any attention. I think that's the funny thing is that even if he was at the party, I don't think he didn't notice that night, like
a couple things here. So we definitely there's a strong like left versus right sentiment in this story. You know what I mean? Like there's like a right wing and a left wing representation in this story. And what I find, I thought this was actually one of Wagner's more humorous stories because of just the absurdity of like people just dying. You know what I mean? Like you get the sense that there's like this hidden hand guiding things around. If this guy's not part of the program, he gets killed somehow or dies mysteriously by some disease. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
and the fact that the liberal candidate died mysteriously, is like. It's just there's people dying left and right in this story, like mysteriously. I just find that to be funny,
Yeah. It's funny because, they have this whole conversation about everything, and it's just kind of one of those relationships like with his wife where you're just like, he doesn't want to talk to her. You know what I mean? He's obviously just married her because he was supposed to, kind of. You know what I mean?
It's another interesting thing that happens too, because he's obviously focused on his work and he's talking about, like I'm about to make this big breakthrough, and she's like, oh great, another one of these breakthroughs where it's like some completely trivial thing you're working on, you know what I mean, to her. Like it's not like some, it's like this trivial like scientific thing that doesn't mean anything to her specifically. But then he acknowledges that he has been working too much and that he really thinks that he should spend some more time with her, which I thought was interesting. There's a wrinkle in it.
But at the same time, he's just thinking about his work. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
this is true. Yeah.
so yeah. But and then it ends with him being like, "Why don't you go buy yourself a new dress?" Basically.
Yeah, here, take the checkbook and go buy yourself something nice. It's like this total old school like way of dealing with stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's like very like 60s way of like brushing off your wife or whatever. But yeah, then it switches, and this is where oh wait, no. First of all, he ends up oh, what's his name?
I'm gonna talk about his coworker who's got the lab next to him.
Yeah, Froneberger.
Yeah.
Who says stuff like muchos gracias.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. There's a lot of humor in this story.
Yeah.
So anyone who's worked in like an office, I don't know if you ever worked in an office, Carl, but like, a lot of what I do is I work in office. Not right now. I work right where you see me, in this fucking blue room that I'm in right now. But like,
right.
But I've done my time in offices, and there's always that really annoying dude who's like, wants to know what you're working on, is like too friendly, like on Monday morning, he's always cheerful. Right. And that's the Fronenberger character. Like he's got the lab he's a colleague of Metzger's, and he's got a lab next door to his. And he's the guy with like the really annoying, stupid, anecdotal humor that is just, I can imagine this guy be very annoying on a Monday morning.
Yeah. And he's like, I guess he's studying like flu viruses or something like that. So
there is a little bit of a, crossover with their work though, you know what I mean? Like there's some similarities, like Metzger's working on a cure for cancer, I guess.
Yeah. And yeah, apparently Fronenberger, Metzger had some like photos out, and of like, I guess, like, what is it, like of like the
basically photographs of like cells or something like that.
Yeah.
There was a term they used in the story, but I can't remember it actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Wait, where is it? I guess it's not important, but I'm like looking and I'm like, I can't. Whatever. Yeah. So it's like photographs of these like tests, like cells that he's working on, and the thing that you get the feeling is that Fronenberger is being purposely nosy. He's trying to get a read on what he's studying. You know what I mean? And we'll find out in the next section that everybody knows basically. So, and the next section is when you hear about another person dying. So he's like sitting there reading his newspaper, and the one guy is like, "Too late for you to help him, huh?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. And it is I saw you reading about the headlines that Supreme Court Justice says Festung, that's his name.
Yeah.
And I guess Justice Freeport's death from cancer just happened. And he's like, the Freeport was a good man, the second justice to die in the last few months, and both of them liberals. They'll have a hard time replacing them, especially with the administration we have right now. And Festung says, oh, well, they'll probably find another couple commies to fill their seats. Don't see how you can seriously regret Freeport and Lloyd after the stands those leftists took on socialized medicine. Sure, it's great to be a bleeding heart humanitarian, but tell me how much of this fancy research you would be doing as a soured pill pusher.
So this is like where we get into like some real cynical, like cynicism here. Festung is like some like right wing, very conservative dude, who looks at socialized medicine or some sort of like Medicare for all, like a program similar to that, as like the nemesis of his like career. Like no funding, the government controlling everything. Like he's one of these guys. You know what I mean? Where it's like it's just interesting, and also that is he also an epidemiologist? Yeah.
Yeah. He's I think he studies disease, like plagues and stuff.
So this is where he really underscores the cynical, nihilistic sort of pointlessness, the point of view that he has to the whole thing with the whole medical field, and this indicates that he's actually not part of this secret society, because he sees things in a different way than they do. Like Festung thinks that medicine is pointless, that we come up with these vaccines, but these diseases just kind of vanish, or they come and go almost by every generation has their nemesis. He says something to the extent of that, where that first it was like the plague, and then it was this, and then it was that. Now it's cancer, and eventually it's going to be something else. And he just thinks that, like, statistically, medicine has done absolutely nothing to prolong human life or to heal people or anything like that. So for him, it's like all this politics is really just about, protecting his job. He's like, we're doing this stuff. Doesn't really matter, but I need to make a living. The liberals are trying to take money out of my pockets, so that, I'm glad this, like, justice is dead, kind of thing,
Yeah, exactly. He basically says that, yeah, like, these things come and go as they will, and it really doesn't matter, like, what we do. Eventually it'll go away, basically.
it's like such a, like, just an awesome like point of view for a guy who makes a living healing. That's like the irony about it, which I love, and that's like what made me laugh out loud when I was reading this. I was like, this guy's like a fucking doctor, man. But he's like, yeah, that's pointless. What I do has very little impact on humanity, but I'm just going to take my paycheck every 2 weeks. And, I don't want the Democrats to take office because they're going to, like, socialize medicine. That's essentially what you get out of Festung.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that Wagner says in that thing I read at the beginning that a lot of these conversations are based off of literally, like, real conversations he's had with people. So it tells you.
Oh, dude, I can imagine, man. Yeah, I can imagine. Like, doctors are, like, some of the most cynical, like, nihilistic people, it seems like.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I've yet to meet a doctor that I particularly like in my life. So I've never met a doctor I'm like, yeah, you're a good person. So, like.
Totally.
Yeah. So it's kind of sewn out through life, right? But yeah, so they have this conversation, which is all about that stuff, and I just think it's funny. He's just like how he is. He's like, he's like, and we'll find something new to die of. Wonder what that'll be. But yeah, okay. So the next section of the story, Metzger leaves that conversation with Festung, gets to his office, and there's Dr. Thackeray. Yeah. Just standing in his office, like, and they kind of have this conversation, and Thackeray ends up giving him these 2 black folios, basically, with, like, that sigil on it, and tells him, like, I want you to read these, and then we'll talk about it in the morning, basically.
This is the one thing, okay, that I had a little bit of an issue with. Okay, so Metzger never actually saw the sigils. You know what I mean? His wife saw them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? Like, this is the one thing where, like, I think, like, his wife saw the rings. Metzger did not make any comment about seeing them. You know what I mean?
He didn't see the ring, but she did describe the seal, and so
Okay.
I'm sure he could recognize it. But then we also find out that his father,
Right.
yeah, he has this, like, memory where he remembers seeing it as well.
Yeah, I found, like, as much as I love Wagner, I felt like that was, like, a little circular. You know what I mean? Like, that part of it where, like, it would have just been, I don't know, just it would have made just as easy to have him actually see that. It would have been a little, I don't know. I'm splitting hairs here, but it's like, that's the one thing I had with this story.
Well, I mean, the thing about it, though, is he doesn't really comment on the seal on the folio. Just kind of says it's there. I don't think there's, like, a real recognition expressed when he sees it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, where is it? Yeah, 2 black binders waiting. Their vinyl covers bore no title. Closer glance, he was aware of a tiny silver seal embossed in either spine. So it's just kind of describing what it is. So he doesn't seem to like recognize it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I
All
think
right.
I think
Fair
we
enough.
are supposed to like connect the dots between what his wife said and what they show in this.
Right. So I see. Yeah. Okay. I'm with you. Now I'm
Yeah.
on board because now it's
Yeah.
more about the reader recognizing the presence of the seal and Metzger still just being kind of oblivious that anything's even going on, really. Okay.
Yeah. I think
Fair
he's like a
enough.
little nervous where he's not sure why Thackeray's
Yeah.
there and
He,
trying to.
he just thinks these binders are just a report that he wants him to read. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't
Yeah.
show any real recognition of the seal. Yeah. So basically, then we cut to the next day, and Metzger has not slept all night. He's like upset, like he's like doesn't understand what this data is. Like he doesn't understand but all he knows is that it basically has data that not only replicated his exact work that he's doing on the cancer, but some of it's like beyond what he could even like fathom. Like essentially, like he would never think of some of the things that's in these reports, you know. But he's just like shocked because it's like he's like, there's already somebody had already found a cure for cancer. Basically, is what these folios are telling this binder is telling him. You know what I mean? So he's like,
A long time ago too. Not, like this basically cures for everything essentially
yeah,
outlined in the material that's within the binders.
yeah, because yeah, we find out there's one that's somewhat newer, and we'll find out in the conversation. So he basically goes there, and there's Thackeray and what's his name, the other guy, the chairman of surgery, doesn't I forget what his name is, but anyway, so there's yep, Thackeray, and then the chairman of surgery, which is the guy that she said earlier that was wearing the ring, and Dr. Lipton, that's it. So yeah, so he's like this research, all this stuff, and they're like, whose work is this? And he says, one of it's Dr. Johnson Taggart, and it says Taggart, but Taggart died 10 years ago, brain tumor. And they're like, the other paper, most of it was the work of Sir David Aubrey. And he says Aubrey died at the turn of the century.
It's like funny. It's almost like an Abbott and Costello kind of thing. I don't know. It's just so funny to me. This is probably the funniest story in the entire collection, because of this dark humor.
Yeah, it's definitely dark humor. So he's like, yeah, and he's saying that in this older one from Aubrey, there's basically cure for everything, essentially. Like everything's laid out. And they're having this conversation. He's like, how is this even possible? Like how is this, he doesn't understand, you know what I mean? So they start to lay it out for him, like, and he realizes they both have rings, and he said, yeah, I like this. Perhaps the world wasn't ready for a cure for cancer. Syntax. He's like, would it be wise to circulate a total cure for cancer just now? He's like, what do you mean, the lives of suffering? The price of power, Dr. Metzger. The price of power, just as every empire is built upon the lives and suffering of the expendable.
Dude, it's like the whole nefarious plot gets like rolled out right here, and you get to learn that these guys are part of this secret organization that's pulling the strings behind everything, I mean, that's like real power, life and death over the entire human race. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, and they basically have been here for untold, like basically since the whole thing that we saw at the beginning of some type of secret cabal, like operating back in the depths of like even like the Egyptian times or whatever. We basically find out that this is true. Like these guys have been around since time immemorial, basically, like kind of controlling like diseases and the health of people, and particularly like this, these guys have been like kind of leading everything into the direction they want to, like make sure that they have power, make sure that they got money, they got wealth. They talk about how sometimes people will accidentally cure certain things, and or they'll actually sometimes they'll like release something and then cure it just because like they're like, yeah, we want to have the recognition. You have to, doctor has to heal sometimes, basically.
But you have to produce, otherwise no one believes in what that you're doing is even working at all. So they have to justify like the money they're making too off of all this. And every now and then they probably resist it, but every now and then they got to cure something, instead of holding all the secrets,
Exactly. And I think it's more fucked up too because they find out that this older guy not only discovered a cure for cancer, but actually created cancer, basically.
Yeah, it's like this incredible, just like cynical, like completely cynical point of view on like the medical world and the power that they wield over life and death. Hence the fourth seal, and the pale horse rider and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. The first time I read the story, I wasn't really sure where it was going. You know what I mean? Like I never, I had no idea what the story was gonna be about. I had no idea I just knew it was about a doctor, right? And when it went this way, I was like, oh, okay, that's where it's going. Like I was like that. I mean, but then I'm like, I could believe it.
Well, we also, as to round it out, there's a guy hiding, Dr. Royce, who's like a psychologist who's like in a hidden room observing this whole thing. Okay. And they want to bring Metzger into the fold because he is a talented physician. He's very bright. He's connected.
His father was one of them.
Yeah, his father was part of this secret society, and so Metzger, in his mind, he's like, yeah, I'm going to infiltrate this whole thing. The bleeding heart liberal part of him is like, yeah, I'm going to infiltrate this, and I'm going to like blow it wide open, and take down these guys, and like all this. They had this whole fantasy about like ending it.
Yeah.
So when he leaves, Royce comes out of his compartment, and he's like, all he says is no.
Yeah.
Like yeah, okay. I checked this guy out. I observed him. He's trouble. He's not going to fit, basically.
Yeah, like he had like this like they had like a video and stuff like he's like watching him, like watching his responses to everything. And I mean, the whole time like he's just horrified. He's like, a physician should be the heel and then all this kinds of stuff, you know what I mean? Like he's just like he really believes in being a doctor. Like he's horrified by this whole idea of like people this like cold-blooded that they are willing to sacrifice millions of people just to hold on to their own power. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. So then we get another visit from Fronenberger back at the lab. This is as Metzger is speechless about what's going on, and he feels like I could put an end to this whole eons long like cabal of power, and I can end this whole conspiracy. You know what I mean? So he goes back to his lab and he runs into Fronenberger.
Yeah, and Fronenberger, it's like hands him a cup of coffee, and Jeff's like, "I'm glad you dropped by. I'd like to talk to you about some of my research and all that stuff." Like he's going to try to make friends with Fronenberger to like see if he can share everything. And I love the ending because he's like, Fronenberger says, "I don't think you'll have time." He reached for Jeff's empty coffee cup, dropped in a pocket of his lab coat. "What do you mean?" asked Jeff thickly, coughing suddenly. There was pain deep in his throat. Another racking cough filled his mouth with blood, and he knew what Fronenberger meant.
Yeah, see, it's great. It's a comedy. This whole thing is a comedy. It's great.
Yeah.
it kind of is like in almost like this like Shakespearean sort of way. It's a comedy, it's like how those old plays are comedies, but they're not really that funny. You know what I mean?
I definitely think this is definitely a dark comedy. Like throughout the whole story, there's kind of this comedic tone to it. It's definitely like maybe a kind of a satire, but there's also this element to it that is definitely like a send up of the whole medical field and working in a medical lab and all this kinds of stuff. Like it just rings true. Like you can really tell that he put a lot of his own experiences into the story.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And hopefully you guys are, if you're interested in Wagner, you're researching him a little bit and discovering a little bit about him. Actually, one of the interesting aside regarding Karl Edward Wagner. Last couple of days, as I said, I was at Nightlands Festival. I ran into one person who knew about Karl Edward Wagner. There was this guy that I knew. He had seen Tombs perform in Charleston, and his father went to high school with Karl Edward Wagner.
Oh wow.
He found him in the yearbook, and he's like, "Yeah, Karl Edward Wagner, high school with his dad."
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah, totally. And we were talking about, just like where the summer ends, and oh, you know what it was? We were talking about the Willows, the Algernon Blackwood story. With there was a reading of that story because like Cadabra put out a record that narrated the story. And while I was listening to it, I was thinking about the Willows in that story, how they're encroaching on the two canoe guys, the guys in the canoe. They're stranded there. And for a minute, I was thinking about the kudzu in where summer ends.
Yeah.
And that's when I was talking to that dude, because the guy's from the South. He knows what kudzu is. So I was talking to this guy, Rob, and I was like, I'm not saying that these stories have any real connection, but it's like, while I was listening to that narration of the Willows, I was thinking about, where summer ends, and kudzu, and how the Willows and the kudzu are kind of this thing, and they both kind of obscured something sinister,
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, I would imagine, Wagner obviously very well. He knows all. He could have been like drawing from the Willows, kind of, like
Yeah.
at least on like a deeper, even like a subconscious level, even if not directly,
That was the first time I'd actually thought about that, was when I was listening to the performance of that piece. And it never really dawned on me at all until that moment. And I was like, man, this is interesting. Because they also were showing visuals behind, they had the reader was like front and center, and they had the guys performing the score in the back. And then there was like a video monitor where they would put imagery. And when they showed the Willows, I was like, oh, something clicked in my mind about the kudzu in River of Night Dreaming. I'm sorry, not River of Night Dreaming, Where the Summer Ends.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I wonder if like is there anything to this like thought process I had about it, And then when I found out this guy Rob knew about Wagner and his dad went to high school with him, I was asking him, and he was like, yeah, I could see that. That sounds like a legit sort of thing to ponder,
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I think that there's definitely could be a connection, then like I think we talked about with Where the Summer Ends episode, that I also could see a kind of influence maybe from like the William Hope Hodgson stories with like the fungus type of thing spreading everywhere,
Yeah, no, definitely.
Like Hodgson has all those like fucked up stories of like fungus people and stuff,
You ever read Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
The novel? Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, I have never read. I have it, but I haven't read it. And the last time I watched it, because we covered it for Necromaniacs maybe a year ago, and I was like, man, this is a total weird tale. Like, this is like a total cosmic horror story. And but I'd never read the novel, so I'm just curious about reading that and checking it out.
Yeah, I remember it being good. I mean, I read it when I was like I don't know, a kid or a teenager, so it's been a while. But I do think it's kind of a weird tale, though, because it's, it has, I guess it has an alien, but in a lot of ways, I think the story itself, like it's not quite as clear that it's an alien invasion. It's just some invasion from somehow, you know what I mean, if I remember correctly. But it still has a weird tale feeling, because it's like the whole way it operates just feels very like weird,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm interested to read that, because I enjoyed the 70s the one that Donald Sutherland and Jeff Goldblum are in. The one they've remade that movie so many times, but like the 70s Invasion of the Body Snatchers, to me, is like the quintessential version of that story.
Yeah, I definitely think it's probably the best. I mean, I do like the original one from the 50s as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I almost feel like you could read the 70s one as not being like a remake per se, but being like a sequel, because you do have the same guy showing up, and the the main character from the 50s one showing up in the 70s one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That I think Mike and I discussed that during that episode about how it is a sequel in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think it's definitely more of a sequel than anything. Like, it could be that you had that first movie where that happened there, and then 20 years later, now it's spreading to like San Francisco and stuff. And I also
Leonard Nimoy has a great role in that movie.
Yeah, he's great in that.
Dude, whenever he shows up and he's not playing Spock, I always get a kick out of it.
One thing I love about that movie is that it's also kind of sending up the whole like me generation, like San Francisco type of people. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of making fun of them. I think is kind of reminds me. Have you ever seen? There's like this old comedy called Serial, Seril. Yeah, it's from the 70s as well, and it's a comedy set in San Francisco that's making fun of like all the me generation stuff. Like, it's really funny though. Like, and it kind of reminded me of they were hitting on the same notes. And my dad was in San Francisco in that time period, like in the 70s. So, and I think he always thought it was funny because it was just like making fun because he knew all those kinds of people.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
that's it, man. That's the fourth seal, and you guys, I hope are enjoying this, and please go out and pick up this In a Lonely Place collection, and enjoy. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Over the wide cliffs of blood-stained coast of Ostia. Leon like a lion, sleeping in the sunshine. Lion lies down. Lion lies down. Out of the strong came forth sweetness. Out of the strong came forth sweetness. Throw his bones over the white cliffs of Dover and murder me in Ostia and murder me in Ostia, the sea of Rome on the blood-stained coast. And the car reverses over the white cliffs of Dover and into the sea of Rome. You can hear the bells humming. You can hear the bells humming. You can hear the bells humming. Throw his bones over the white cliffs of Dover and into the sea of Rome.